Carrie, I'm a new consultant. I just hung out my shingle, leaving corporate, or got pushed out of corporate, either way. Gonna take over the world. My first big decision as a new consultant, Carrie, is I need to decide how much money I want to make. So I've decided that I want to replace my income. Okay, because that's exciting. It's motivating. I want to make as much money as I made before. Okay. How do you feel about that? Am I doing this right? Is that the right approach? Any comments?
I'm uninspired, but I will give you some credit. The first thing I will say is congratulations for coming up with a goal at all. Because one thing that often happens when we talk to people, we ask them what their goal is they haven't even set one, right? Because they're too afraid or, too worried to actually put a number out there. So good job there. You get your first, your first, I was going to say gold star, but maybe it's a silver star for that.
Yeah, it's the bronze, gold bronze.
Right. Yeah. Because I think, what you're getting at is the fact that you have set a goal which is more based on scarcity than it is on anything else, right? It's like I need to do kind of as well as I was doing before. And that feels more like clawing yourself back to a certain place than something that's going to be exciting. That's something that you're going to want to chase, something that you're going to, really be able to work towards when things get difficult. And so, yeah, I think it's, we have this conversation over and over and over again with our clients, right? Because they often don't see that there's anything different that they can plan for or hope for. And, a big part of our job, which sounds kind of funny, is helping people see that they can do more, that their goals can be bigger, and that they can, go farther than they have set for themselves when they decide to start their business.
Yeah, there's a few big problems with this approach. If you detected the sarcasm in my voice, the first is what you made before as an employee at a company has zero bearing on what you could earn as a consultant. I mean, the only consistent variables are the time that you have, because you have 40 hours a week as an employee and you have 40 hours a week as a consultant. So the time is equal, and your expertise is the same, right? You didn't just all of a sudden, by virtue of becoming a consultant, be more of an expert than you were before, right? So those are consistent variables, but literally everything else has changed. The business model has changed. Who you're doing it for is going to change. The number of organizations you're going to serve is going to change. The way you're going to serve them is going to change. And within the who you serve, there's so much variation there. Some clients are going to have more pain, more problem, more motivation, therefore more resources to spend. Some clients are going to have more belief in you, more belief in your process, therefore willing to pay higher prices. There's so I could go on and on and on about how different the scenarios are, hopefully to show you how ludicrous this contention is that, well, I want to make as much as I made before. Sure, fine. But if that's the extent of your goal as a consultant, I don't really know why you're a consultant, to be honest. Because as much as we talk about employment being risky, fair, employment is not what it used to be, right? Employment is risky. People are getting let go, laid off, left, right, and center. The future of work is changing. Jobs are not as secure as they used to be. True. Still more secure than consulting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, sure, we could argue concentration risk in employment, one paycheck, in consulting, if you do it right, multiple paychecks. Yeah, so there is some diversification there. But still, the ups and downs and the roller coaster in consulting is, you can mitigate that a little bit, but you can't eliminate it altogether. It will be up and down a little more than employment will be. So I'm not sure it makes sense to do it. And I tell people this, like, if your goal is to replace your income, get a job and replace your income. Is that too harsh?
You're not being too harsh. And, one of the things that having a goal of replacing your income does is ensures that probably all you're going to do is replace your income, right? Because if you think about, imagine that you were working in a corporate environment and now you're working as a solo entrepreneur. That's how most people come to this. And they're probably doing something similar, right? They're using similar skill set. You got to remember that business was not selling your services at the rate that they were paying you, right? They were paying for all of their overhead. They were making a profit, hopefully. Maybe not, who knows? But, what I think is, specifically dangerous is going out into the world and wanting to make the same amount, sort of per hour or per job than you did when you were working for somebody else. And so this is insidious, right? It's not just that there's this, broad kind of vague issue that you're not aiming high enough. This is also going to cause you to make really bad decisions when it comes to deciding who to work for, when it comes to, deciding what to charge, when it comes to deciding how much effort you're going to put into things. And so, to your point, this is about recognizing that you are in a completely different headspace, need to be in a completely different headspace. And now it's about not thinking about yourself going out and working for a certain amount of money, but it really needs to be about thinking about your business, right? And how does the business need to function? What does the business need to make? Which is a completely different way of thinking. But if you can put yourself into that chair, right, of the CEO of a company, as opposed to, hi, I'm Kara, I just started my company and I'm just sort of, stumbling my way along, you're going to make different decisions from that seat.
Yeah, a couple of brilliant points you're making here. I want to dig a little bit deeper into the one about, you're as an employee, you weren't the final product, most likely, right? I think there's a couple of scenarios there. One is if you worked at a consulting firm, then what you said is absolutely true. You billed an hourly rate and the firm charged more than that, right? That's not what they charged the client. There was a higher fee, right? And now if you're going to be the solo consultant, then that fee is entirely yours. And yeah, there's work to do to position yourself to justify that fee, sure, but you're going to make what the firm charged, not what you got paid. And in the other context, if you were in corporate and you were kind of a cog in the machine, so to speak, you weren't the product. Maybe it was a software company. I'm using this as a random example. It was a software company, you worked in finance, right? Well, at a software company, the finance leader is worth a certain amount of money. And there's a market for that. Lots of finance leaders trying to get into software. There's a market for that. There's a market price. That market price has nothing to do with what your financial expertise is worth in the consulting market as a product, as the product or service in and of itself. Because you're now way closer to the end of the value chain, right? At that software company, again, random example, the finance person's nowhere near the end of the value chain. You're not nowhere near the product. You're a cog in the machine that's required to build an organization. But now as a consultant, you are the product. And therefore, what you can charge for that expertise, now that you're closer to the end of the value chain, is much more significant than it would have been in a corporate context, which is really, really important to understand. Mm-hmm. And secondly, where this came from is a conversation I had with a consultant, and I said, how much money do you want to make? They were starting out, and they said, well, I want to replace my income. And I said, I hate that goal. I said, how much is that? So about $250. Here's the problem with that. If you say I want to make $500,000 versus $250, those are consequential decisions. Like that's a difference. That it's not on paper, it's not theory. Like it's not, oh, here's my goal and let's see what happens. Making $500K requires doing things differently than making $250K. It's a different product. It's a different offer. It's a different pricing structure, right? It's not like you make $250 and then you work twice as hard to make $500. Well, probably that's impossible because you're going to be working full time to make $250. So how do you make $500, right? So it has, consequential decisions about what you do, who you do it for, what kind of offer you sell, how you price it. Like these are all factors that are going to be influenced by what your goal is ultimately.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's probably also worth talking about the fact that part of this may have come from the very fact that you asked the question, right? What is your goal? It's possible they hadn't thought of it before, hadn't even considered a goal. It's also challenging often for people to say the goal out loud to another human being, right? And this is often a thing that, you find is that someone either has a really big goal in the back of their head, but they don't want to tell anyone. So they'll say, I want to replace my income. Or they are afraid that, a lot of people step into consultancy very tentatively because deep down inside they think they're going to fail, right? Or they're afraid they're going to fail and they're going to be embarrassed. And I quit my job and I did this thing and my family bought into it and now I'm going to disappoint them. And so there's also, I think, a motivation to sometimes put out a goal that feels like it's easy, because that way you stand a better chance of, you stand a better chance. I will argue that why this is false, but you think you stand a better chance of actually making it, right? And not being embarrassed or kind of caught out in looking like you are, aiming too high. And so I also, there's also, I think, something here a little bit deeper than just the math when it comes to, deciding what your goal is going to be. What's the goal that you're working to every day? What's the goal that you're going to say when you're talking to, Ahmed on a call or to your uncle at a party?
Do you think the people that go into consulting thinking they're going to fail ever succeed?
I feel like that's a bit of a nuanced question because I don't know that it's
No,
necessary.
it's black and white. Everything's black and white, Barry.
Oh yeah,
Stop being
forgot
nuanced.
who I was talking to. But I don't think that people go into it thinking they're going to fail. Like, I don't think if you asked anybody, are you going to be able to do this, that they would say, no, I think I'm going to fail. But I do think, and this goes back probably to all the things we've been talking about, right? Around the notion of what is your worth. And especially if you've been in corporate for a long time, right? What have you sort of been trained to think that your worth is? And so I do believe that people go into consulting often with a backup plan or with, maybe a hope that they'll make 500K in their first year, but feeling that I'm going to be okay if I just replace my income. I think that we tend to sort of back off of our goals because of that fear that we probably can't even articulate. Because I don't think that anyone's going to say, no, I'm doing this and I'm going to fail. But I think there's this sort of ticking time bomb in the back of a lot of people's heads that has them making, unfortunate choices.
So let me give you two scenarios. Okay. Two different consultants. And I want you to tell me who you have more confidence in. And then we'll debrief why.
Sure.
Okay. So you got John on one hand. Okay. And you ask John, John, what's your goal? And John says, well, right now I'm not doing very well. So I'd love to replace my income. And if I can't do that, then, I'll have to go start applying for jobs. But if I could just replace my income, what I was making in corporate, I'd be pretty happy. That's John's answer. Okay.
I don't have any faith in John so far.
What's that?
I don't have a lot of confidence.
We're not loving John so far, right?
We're not there yet.
But your judgment. Susie, on the other hand, asked Susie the same question. What's your goal? And Susie goes, well, I think I can replace my income pretty quickly. $250,000. That should be fairly straightforward, but that's not my goal. I've got my sights set. I'm making about $500,000 as a consultant, as an independent, as a solo. It might take me some time to get there, but I'm confident I can command those kinds of fees in the marketplace, and that I'll inevitably achieve that goal. Who do you have more confidence in?
Well, I mean, it's clearly Susie.
But why? No.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just about the goal. And this is probably true in general, right? If we want to get more complex about it, it's about the approach. So John was, kind of he's desperate, right? John is doing this out of desperation. John is doing this because he wants to, get back to something that he thinks is the best he can do. What's different about Susie is she has not just a goal and a vision, but a plan, right? The notion of I can get to my previous income pretty quickly, and then I want to move on to something else. And it's probably worth stopping here to say replacing your income is a noble pursuit, right? Like that's probably the bare minimum you need to be able to move forward. And so to have a plan in place to get there, I think is perfectly fair, right? But it's about having a plan in place to get there by X date and then be able to move beyond that into a different space. And so what I really like about the way that you articulated Susie's goal is she also didn't sound like all sorts of flaky, right? Because we also have this challenge where people come in and we say, what's your goal? This happens rarely, but occasionally. And they'll say, well, I was making $150,000 at my job and I want to make $3 million this year. You're like, okay, good. I'm glad you're excited. But there's a progression, right? There's a path to get there. And so, the way that you spoke about Susie tells me that she sees the growth, right? She understands that there's work to be done. She understands that she's not just going to get to 3 mil in 12 months. She also understands that she needs to replace her income so that she can pay her mortgage and feed her family and do all of those things. And so I think there's also something here about the notion of it being a well thought out goal, right? It needs to be a stretch goal, but it also needs to be well considered. And you could fool yourself into thinking that John's was well thought out because it was easier, but honestly, his was nothing, right? It was a throwaway. It was I just need to do this thing. Susie actually has a vision and a better plan to get there.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it's not about the goal; it's about the energy, right? Like the difference between John's energy and Susie's energy is night and day. It's abundance, Susie, versus scarcity. It's want versus need. It's, I guess I have to do this thing to make money versus I get to do this thing and I get to take advantage of this opportunity. And listen, I'll tell you, we get both come to us. John's come to us and Susie's come to us. And they both want help and we can help both of them. Guess who does better? Guess who gets better results? And so, for the listener, I want you to think about, the goal, absolutely. And that's kind of the whole point of this episode is the goal. But also the energy and the attitude, right? If you go into consulting as a necessary, means, like I have to do this to make money because I can't get a job. I mean, that may work out just fine, but you're not going to do terribly well. You're not going to be a success. Rather, if you go into it with, some more rose-colored glasses on and looking at it as an opportunity and thinking more broadly about the opportunity and what this could represent to you, what you could achieve outside of, formal employment, and you start thinking, more broadly about the possibilities beyond just replacing your income, I think you stand a chance to do much better.